Thanks for coming. First of all, thanks for coming at the 4 o'clock session. This is a pretty good turnout for 4 o'clock. I'm loving it. So today we're going to talk about understanding progressive web apps, why you should care, and kind of just a quick run through of the agenda. Lots to talk about. I know I've got till 6 p.m., so we've got time to cover it. What are progressive web apps? Number one. Number two, why PWAs are important to your users. I think that's keeping user experience in mind. That's really important. When you should build a PWA, a little bit about actually how to build them, and then some tools and resources, which I've found real valuable. My name is Mark Shropshire, and I work at MediaCurrent. And this is a bunch of text that talks about things that I wrote, so you can check that out. A little bit about MediaCurrent. We're a full-service digital agency, and we focus mostly on enterprise applications and organizations that have challenges. It's always exciting. So we're always exploring new tech, and PWAs were something, I knew they were out there. I knew parts of them, pieces of them, but didn't really get into that till I was working on something earlier this year. And I was like, I didn't know a lot of things here about PWAs, and I feel like a lot of the community may not know all these things. And so it's good to kind of get the word out. So, and that's really where this came from, was learning about PWAs on a project that I was working actually on, not at MediaCurrent, but just kind of a side project that I was working on for myself. And it was interesting just to learn that, PWAs allow you to do a lot of things native applications can do, native mobile apps, for instance. But how far can that go? When do you need a native mobile app? Those kinds of questions. And what's the future of using web and open standards for mobile applications? So PWAs have only been around for really a few years. But it's really just a collection. PWA is a term. These technologies involved have been around maybe longer, but a couple of folks coined the term back in 2015, so it hasn't been that long. You've probably seen posts on Medium and things like that about PWAs. But it's really a collection of open web APIs and progressive enhancements. It's all about having things cross-platform compatible so that you can have a PWA benefit, whether it's on an iOS device, Android, on the desktop, web, different browsers. But one of the goals is really rivaling native applications. Who has heard of PWAs before coming in here today? Awesome, that's cool. Who made it to the PWA session this morning? There's another one talking about the PWA module. Anybody? Okay, that's interesting. So there's another session, we'll talk a little bit about it, how to do PWAs with Drupal. And actually one of the presenters is actually walking in, Christoph. Good to see you. So that session I highly recommend. We'll talk about it a little bit. So there's a little bit of crossover in this, but I think it's good. I think PWAs are really important, and we need to know more about them as developers. So I thought this was a really cool quote from Alex Russell, one of those who coined the term PWA, and just saying, hey, this is just doing the web right, at least from a best practice standing, or, it's these collection of technologies to do things correctly, do things better. And the idea that you don't have to you can run an app on a device and you don't have to go to an app store to do that. I think that's a huge benefit. Actually got a slide coming up talking about how, an example of how quick it can be to access a PWA app. I know some of this text might be small, and that's okay. A lot of this, and I'll post the deck after the talk today on the DrupalCamp Atlanta site, but I've got links back to everything galore in the deck you can click on, and this stuff is really pulled from a lot of those sources. But these are the focus points that Google talks about when it comes to PWAs, and that's reliability. So you want to have these applications be reliable. You want them to be fast, and you want them to be engaging. So there's a little bit of more information here detailing each of those. But But you want to have the option, for instance, for the network goes down, that you have some things you can optionally cache and still access. If there's no network, you're going, classic example, I'm on a train going through a tunnel. I don't have any network access, still should be able to work with your application. You want them to respond quickly. I like they use the word janky, good description. We all know what that means when scrolling and things. And you want them to feel, that experience. Like I think we all know a really good quality native application, whether in Android or iOS, that feel like it just works. It feels comfortable to use. And you really want to have that from the web. So these are some principles that take it a little bit deeper from those three tenets that on the previous slide, talking about, and this is actually from Mozilla. So I will just say Google and Mozilla, the MDN docs actually have some of the best, those two sites have some of the best documentation on PWAs. And so they're really good. But some of those, we're talking about discoverability. So SEO is a real important part of the PWA principles. You want them to be installable. So something really cool is that it depends on the platform, but for instance, Android's way ahead of iOS in a lot of this, but a great example of that is on Android, you may have been to a website where it offers up an app. Can I install this app to the home screen? Or, would you like to install this and use it again? So that's one of the features. You want it to be installable. So iOS, it's not friendly really to install. It's frustrating. You have to go to the share sheet and actually say add to home screen, which doesn't have the word install in there. So that's a little frustrating. But that's one of the goals here. Linkable, you want to be able to get into deep links into the application from the web. It is a website after all. Again, network independent. It plays into caching and availability. Progressive. And that's just being able to have some of the latest technologies running on modern browsers, but be able to fall back. On older browsers and older platforms, it still should work. Still should some of the content should still render, things like that. Re-engageable, making it easy to go back into the app and find it again. Certainly when it's on your home screen, it's great to be able to do that. Responsive, and to me this is an interesting one, responsive, because just a few years ago, we all thought, all we have to do is make this website responsive, right? That was the answer to everything. You'll see with PWAs now, responsiveness with mobile and tablet views or whatever, that's just an aspect now of PWA and is really not the entire solution, but it is part of it. And safe. A lot of the test systems we'll talk about for PWAs and building them, they will flag if you don't have requests going out over HTTPS. So that's real important that it's secure. So I'm gonna sit down. I feel like I'm comfortable here. Everybody's comfortable. It's 4 o'clock. I'm gonna do a few little demos here, just to kind of show you some things that are out there. So the first thing we're gonna do is check out. So Starbucks has an app that is a PWA, and so what I want to show is probably not everybody, but are folks in here familiar with Lighthouse as a tool for development performance? Okay, so just a few, but yeah, Lighthouse. So Lighthouse is a great tool. You may have already used it inside Chrome, for instance, to check performance. There's also command line versions of it you can install via NPM to run inside your continuous integration setups and things like that. But one thing that Lighthouse has that's not always something that's everyone realizes is that there's an option to do checks for PWA apps and see are you fulfilling all those needs. And I'm going to flip this around. So what we're going to do is we go under audits. When I pulled up, and on the Mac, I just do Option Command I. I think Windows and Linux comparable keystrokes, but they're out there just to get the dev tools up. And so there's a lot of switches here. I'm going to just leave this on mobile for now, and we're going to turn off these other checks. You can certainly run those. They're great to run and learn about, but we're going to just do some audits against Progressive Web App here. And so you can see where I've just got that one selected. And there's some other settings here, but we'll kind of leave those out of the box. So we're going to run an audit now. And this is standard Lighthouse stuff here, where you'll see it pulling up and running things in the background. So this is the test results from Lighthouse, saying here's where app.starbucks.com ranks on the PWA test. They've passed on fast and reliable, like page loads fast enough. Get a 200 when offline. Get it to installable. It says, hey, we're running HTTPS. That's part of the security aspect of it. Registers a service worker, which is something we'll talk about. It's real important to PWAs and part of what makes them what they are. Talks about the manifest. There's a number of other things here, and you will get to a place where not everything that is a PWA may not pass 100%, but passing 100% means it's all on track. I think after reviewing a lot of these sites, I think there's reasons that certain developers have chosen to only make their results 100% or not. There's probably reasons they haven't implemented parts of these results. Whether they're good reasons or not, those are decisions they've made, because I'm sure they're running Lighthouse to check that. But you can see here there's a flag that says the viewport is sized incorrectly, and so that's an improvement that could be made. I don't really necessarily know why they would do that per se, but that's how you can run. So one of the processes of implementing PWAs right there, just to get ahead a little bit, but a little sneak preview, is just frankly being able to run Lighthouse on a website. That's a way to check your current site. So go check your sites, something you're working on now, a project, and see how it fares in that world. I did want to also mention, I think, a really cool site. I don't know if anybody's familiar with this, but this is what the web can do today. This is going to show whatever browser you're in, what the capabilities are for that. And not necessarily all of these have to do with features in PWAs, but certainly they cross over. And it's still good to know what can be done. And so I'm in Google, and you can see it has file access. It can access USB. There's no NFC. But if I'm on a different device, if I'm on an Android device with an NFC, it might register, yes, you have NFC. But it has to be things that are available via the web browser. So a really good resource. Any questions so far about those two, Lighthouse and what the web can do? Okay. So one thing that's talked a lot about is offline access with PWAs. I think this is interesting. This is a plugin that you can use for Webpack to do offline things in that context. But what I wanted to kind of show is that we can, so there's a plugin and you can use it within your apps and things like that. But this example of that plugin is shown here, and it's set up so that we will get an indicator when there's not anything online. And instead of it showing some type of browser error, it is a little more friendly. At least we know we're offline. So, so I'm gonna do something here. It's a little frightening. I'm gonna turn off my network access. So this is where you hope. Wow, I hope I can get it back, turned on at the end. But you notice how I'm getting I get the little kind of the Wi-Fi icon kind of deal here at the top. So just kind of keep an eye on that. And if I turn off my Wi-Fi, it kind of flickers, it went away. It's kind of neat, but notice that the page isn't doesn't have any kind of issues, and it's, it hasn't tried to refresh and give you any kind of indicator that something's wrong. So just an example there that offline is real important. And there's a lot of flexibility with PWAs as far as, and that technology around caching and things like that, to as far as what does offline mean to you and your app. Like, you may not need everything available offline. Maybe you want lots of stuff available, but those are decisions that have to be made based on factors and things we can talk about. All right, here we go. We're turning the Wi-Fi back on. Let's give this a shot. All right, says we're available now. So that's kind of a neat trick. So right there, you could use this plugin, it looks like, on a website to even, if you needed this feature, I'm not saying this is necessarily useful day to day, but you could show someone when the website's offline or online. There's something that could be useful. All right, so this is a great site. This is a site worth checking out as you explore PWAs and that kind of technology. It's called AppScope. This is literally an app store for progressive web applications, and it's got some really cool features in it that I'd like to show you. This is where I found some of the PWAs that are out there to check out, but you can kind of see how they made it look like an app store. And I think that's the message. These are applications. Our web apps, we don't have to feel as web developers any kind of shame. We're writing legit apps, right? Just because they're not in Google Play or the Apple App Store doesn't mean that there's anything wrong. It's actually good. It's open standards and a lot of the open source philosophy going on. So one thing I want to show you here is a little bit about this Twitter Lite, for example. If you go into that, you can actually launch the app. This is fun, by the way, to access AppScope on your mobile device. To me, it's more interesting than in Chrome on a desktop, but you can go on your mobile device, launch the app, and experience it. You've probably a lot of people have already been to this site and didn't even realize it was a PWA, but if you go to mobile.twitter.com, it's a PWA. So it talks about it, gives you a lot of info. But here's something that's really neat, and that is that we get immediately at the bottom of each of these, we get features where it tells us, check, HTTPS, yes. Is there a manifest? And you can go view the manifest, which is a technical part that we'll talk about of what makes a PWA a PWA. Does it support offline? Yes. Can you install on Android? Yes, easy. iOS? Yes, you can. It's a little bit of a pain, but that's not Twitter's fault. And then the Lighthouse score for this app is 100. So it's the same. If you go, so you should be able to go to mobile.twitter.com and run Lighthouse like we did a minute ago and see that. And also like that they've got some related articles about the apps, which is great research to check out. There is another App Store-like site called PWA Rocks. I think this is a good one too. It's got some different ones, probably some crossover, but I just want to know that comes up a lot. When I'm just looking around at PWA, Googling that and checking out, trying to learn about it. This one comes up quite a bit. I kind of like AppScope because it shows you a lot of other things, but that one did not support offline, apparently. Just kidding. I haven't been there yet. That's the funny thing about offline support. You need to access the site first and let a lot of things load before it can do its offline magic. So I'm going to jump back to the deck here, and we will kind of continue on. Okay, so why are PWAs important to your users? This was an interesting one because so much of this satisfies us as developers, web developers, I feel like, because we like the technology, we like what it does. But in the end, all of this is about like user experience. I mean, that's really 100% what it's about. So I think this kind of puts us back really on why do we do all this stuff? Why would we even spend time trying to make a website have PWA features? So here's an example quote here. In a consumer mobile app, every step you add to your onboarding flow will cost you about 20% of users. So this quote was related to in a traditional app store experience. For example, if I go out and I'm gonna or a traditional e-commerce app, I think is where this one came from. If I'm going to go out and I'm going to add something, I'm going to go like, oh, I want to buy something. And if all they have is a native app, then I have to go and search for it on an app store. I have to go download the app, install it, add something to a cart, check out. I've got to go through all these steps, sign up for an account. If every one of those steps drops your users by 20% because they just give up, that's kind of a bad thing, kind of similar to why we have numbers on where we want to keep our response times on page loads, within check. Real similar example, I think. And so this is an illustration of what this could even look like. Native versus progressive web app. I go and I load the app store, right? So I'm going to search the app store, find the app, I'm going to install it, I'm going to open it, I'm going to use it. And you can think of other steps depending on the application, like we're talking e-commerce, that would fit into this. But pretty much, and I've probably oversimplified this, so in fairness, there might be another step or so here you can think of, but you see the point. With a PWA, I can go visit the website on a device, any device, I should be able to, and I should be able to immediately use the application. If I choose to install it and keep it, that's fine. But I'm immediately getting the benefit of all these things we're talking about: security, performance, the speed, usability, all that kind of stuff. So we looked at Twitter Lite a little bit ago, and as an example, and I thought this was awesome, and I actually. This is a real screenshot. I went out to the DrupalCamp Atlanta site and viewed it. Thought it would be cool. But Twitter Lite, these are some of the things just by going to a PDA type application for their mobile. They saw a 65% increase in pages per session, 75% increase in tweets sent, and a bounce rate that dropped by 20%. I mean, when you start seeing these numbers, I've got some other examples. They're kind of exciting. I think they excite people. You guys look excited. It's 4:30. You guys are super pumped up. But the thing is, this makes me, I think it does you too, probably want to learn more about this and how do you implement this on your applications? Because if I can do this, it definitely can make customers happy. We bring value to our clients, to our own projects. I mean, it's awesome. This is the Pinterest. This is amazing. So I really would love everybody in here tonight, instead of going to the after party, I want you to download this link and go read this. I'm kidding. You still go to the after party. But Doug's offended there. But I seriously, check out, when I get the slides up there, check out this link. It's from Pinterest Engineering. They have I've summarized it just briefly, but I just say there's a ton of great info in here on why they decided to go progressive web app, the benefits they saw after a year. It's done all kinds of stuff. It's really all about, for them, onboarding users. Another benefit they see is, frankly, just international. Let's think about places in the world where data, data speeds are slower. Maybe they can't run a full-blown native app. Maybe the size of even downloading the apps becomes a problem originally, right? Because we forget about that when we're on broadbands and things like that. But when you go and install a native app on Android or iOS, and you're sitting there watching 100 megs go by as you download it and install it, may not feel like a big deal. It may feel like a big deal to somebody that doesn't have that kind of access. But you can see the increases they had in Brazil and India of usage. And they increased, 103%. I mean, these are numbers that are hard to argue. I mean, I wish I could have numbers like this for all the things that I get to work on. It doesn't happen. It's important. That's why this stuff's so important, I think. And to Pinterest, the pins seen have been increased 401%. I mean, it just seems mind-boggling. For me, I can't get enough of the pins. I'm kidding. I don't use Pinterest daily, but I'm sure it's fine. And lots of people use it, obviously. But that is a great article. I encourage everyone to check it out for sure. So let's talk about when you should build a PWA, if you're not convinced yet. If you're not convinced yet. You should always do that. I put always, but I do think you should always consider adding the technologies of progressive web apps to everything you build in websites, mobile apps. Think about, with PWA technology, you can basically even have just a portion of your website be the start URL. That's one of the settings in the manifest. So there's lots of options here. I just think we have to educate ourselves as web developers to say, hey, what are the things we can do? How should we do it? And for some, turning on making the entire website a PWA makes sense. Making portion of it. Some may say, well, maybe I don't really need offline access, and I know I'm not going to be 100% compliant, but I do want to have some of these other features, and even adding other features to your application is a huge benefit. So I think it's always a consideration to add in there. I know this is probably small for some of the folks in the back. I'll kind of summarize it, but to me, it's just when I take into account what Mozilla says, Google says, every article I've read about PWAs, which has been very extensive, I feel like it breaks down to me to this. User experience. Do you care about user experience? Yes. You should build it. Do you care about conversions? Yes. You should build it. And then budget. And here's some reasons why. So for user experience, if I have a PWA app, then and it feels more like a native app, and the technologies will help you get there. That's a huge thing to consider. Just how they feel to the user, the experience, the joy that they have using that application. It's important, but just again, going from just hey, all we need to do is responsive, right? Going to that from let's pull in some of these other technologies to improve what the application experience is like. That is just night and day in a lot of cases. So it really is a modern look on what we can do from a user experience standpoint. But on conversions, I think all those numbers, previous slides, prove the point. Those conversion numbers are there. I think there'll be more and more studies, people releasing what they found. But it's going to be different for every case and all the situations. But certainly, it looks promising. One of the things on conversions that I find really interesting is that there are organizations like Pinterest who already had native apps, and then they had a website. And the website's kind of a traditional Web 2.0, 2.5, 3.1, whatever numbers, pretty traditional website. But what they found when they went to having a PWA is they fit this middle ground. It really was an onboarding to their full app. So maybe somebody is in a place where that PWA is a better experience because of data restrictions or whatever. But maybe it's just a way to have that person more or less get hooked on the product. They really like what they're doing there, and then they get prompted somewhere and say, hey, go download the full native app, or however Pinterest sells that. Next thing you know, they're on the full native experience. So it can kind of be a gateway to those native applications, and that's fine. But speaking of that, has anybody in here ever built a native iOS or Android application? So Christoph has. Christoph, you probably would agree that it can be challenging and expensive, and it's another technology. It can be. Like, it's certainly. So we get into budget situations. So if we go with native apps and Android, then you're facing having possibly another team or others that are experienced at writing in Java, Kotlin, knowing the Android SDKs, knowing how to publish to those app stores, which is, on Google Play is not as big a hassle. It's still an extra step. On Apple, it's a massive hassle. But this, the same kind of thing on iOS side, it's Objective-C, but Swift is now the modern way to do it. And again, Apple SDKs, keeping up with all that. So I don't know about you, but it's hard for me in my head to keep like all of that in mind. Like, we're all developers. We can learn any language. We can learn any text thrown at us. But also, I feel like if we focus on the technologies we work with, we also get to be way better at those. We get to be experts. And so that's where focus on web has a lot of advantages. So when you get into budgets, that's where it directly applies. Like, I can't imagine like someone comes in and says, hey, I'd like to have a native app. I'd start asking them, why do you need a native app? Like, get down to those questions. What are you trying to solve with that? Because it can be done. Do you have the budget? Let's talk about that. This is what it's going to cost. And we can bring on a team that does that, and we can go through all the steps. But it can get costly. And there's times where the answer is yes, we still want native apps. But at this point, I can't imagine you're still going to have a web presence and not having PWAs as part of that experience. Doesn't make sense. So really the thing here is, if a PWA has all the, if the features are available that you need in the platforms you're concerned with, you might even be able to just not ever worry about native apps. And in the future, we might have a world with a lot less native apps. I mean, this is the working theory, that we're headed towards more of just PWA will be the standard way you install and use apps. I mean, number one, Google's behind PWAs. They've created a lot of, the standards of how they think it should be, or at least their philosophy on it. If you remember when the original iPhone was released, there weren't native apps. The vision originally was web. We just weren't really ready for it, I guess. I mean, that's my assumption. I just don't think we were there. But Steve Jobs had the vision for that. He saw that, but had to agree later that, yeah, okay, we'll do the native app stuff. So I feel like we have to do this one, when to develop native application. We talked about it a little bit. I do think right now, if you need maximum speed, maximum access to features, a lot of times, a platform may release some type of new feature. For example, the iPhone came out, announced, this last week here we got some new phones, right? So there's some new hardware features in there with the cameras and all. Maybe some of those camera features aren't yet available through the web. They may be in the future, but they may not be there now. So if you need that today, then you might have to go native. On Android, new Pixels released, and it's got similar fancy camera stuff too. So maybe I can't get to all that yet. So feature access is important. Just maximum speed. Although I think web's getting there, and it's pretty close. It's pretty. To me, that's a little bit of the lesser of the others between App Store and features, and then of course App Stores. I think there's cases where having a native app in the App Store right now, it still can be a marketing thing. I don't know though. I think that's changing. I think that world's starting to change, where it's not as necessary. But yeah, maybe it is. Depending on the type of application you're working on, if your competitors are in there, it's hard to not be there. Still does not mean you shouldn't build a PWA to go along with it. So let's jump into how to build these things. I'll make sure I'm doing okay on time. I think I am. So these are the 3 components or criteria for a PWA. And again, this is, keep in mind, this is something that has, what a PWA is we've been through it. This is something that some people cooked up to have a marketing name basically around it. That's really what it is. But the idea is over time, all this stuff is going to change. New technologies will come in, and that'll be part of what makes a PWA to people. But these core things, I think, are still going to be there for a good while. HTTPS, we should be doing that everywhere anyways. Good web devs, we should just do that. And that should be easy. Let's not even talk about that. But when we get into web app manifest, that is a document. It sits in the root of your project usually. Manifest.json. You've probably seen them in projects. You've probably checked out repos that you've seen them and wondered what that is. We'll talk about that more in a second, show an example. And then a service worker. Service worker enables all kinds of things like caching and ways to keep connections going and things like that. So we'll kind of show a little bit about that too. Those are the 3 baseline criterias that are out there for what's there. And then I wanted to show, this is a pretty neat little tool. It's called a PWA Builder. And I challenge anybody later, if you play this video back today, and I'm going to do this for bio, but if you count the number of times I say PDA, okay, only been twice instead of PWA, I feel like there should be some prize, because I sometimes want to say that for some reason. I guess I have personal digital assistants on my mind, but so let's check out this little app here, this web app. This is so little history here. This is a Microsoft site and project, and you're like, why are they involved? Why were they interested? Well, does anybody have a Windows phone? Okay. You may have. Some people in here probably have had, at some point, or maybe you've had it for testing. But Microsoft was making a run at the phone space a while back, and there was Windows phones, and they were out there, and they were going against iPhones and Android devices and things like that. So one thing, though, Microsoft, I think, did really great. They were a big early proponent of allowing it to try to make it easier for you to get web apps into their store and not do the whole native thing. I think they saw that. I think that was awesome. So some of this, I think, came from that, a little bit of that lineage, but this site will let you put in any site, check to see what the status is for, it's gives you somewhat Lighthouse-like reports, but I don't think it replaces Lighthouse, by the way. But I'm going to put mobile.twitter.com in. Nah, we'll do that. I think this one will be the right one to use. So we put that URL in. You can put your own URL in. This is the one. So anyway, this one's not coming back. I was thinking this one came back with manifest and service worker, but I think it's doing some redirects in the background and not hitting those pieces correctly because it should have that stuff. But
so you're pointing to an existing PWA app.
It has to be on the internet, yeah. Any site, any website on the internet, you can point to it. And actually, there's a GitHub repo. I think you can run this application theoretically on your own server and stuff, but because it's open source, what they're doing here. But it will check for that you have a manifest, a service worker, and a security. Those core principles, right? So, and that's exactly right. Just any site. So I can go back and let's go back. We'll try Media Current. I haven't tested that one yet. I'm not doing that, but that would be a great challenge. I'm gonna find one that's got some of these for sure. But you can better believe whatever it is on Media Current, I want to get that right on there if it's not. Because we just switched from what were we using bio for MediaCurrent.com? Jekyll. We switched to Gatsby. We're using Gatsby now. So Gatsby's got capabilities to do some really good tools to do PWAs. But here we can see on this site we've got a manifest, and it's given us a 40 out of 40. There's a service worker. So service worker has a push manager registration 0. So that's something that's missing according to this from the from this. But it's 35 out of 40. It doesn't mean it's not a progressive web app. Just means it doesn't have that piece. Then you could go look at this and say, what does that mean? Look it up and decide if it's something you want to correct or not. Security is something you definitely want to stay on top of. But these are some properties that I think in the manifest are all good. But I did want to use an example here to show what the manifest looks like. And boy, I love seeing W3C manifest. That's nothing like you would get in the native web app world, right? Or the native app world. So web standards, it's really awesome. So one thing they do here is this is actually the manifest file, and it's a JSON file. Whoops. Let me go back to that. So if I'm going to zoom out a little bit here. So anyway, if you go to the site, you can just add manifest.json to the end of the URL, and you can get it, and it's a little easier to read. But what they've done here automatically is pulled out the name, the short name that's needed, and that's what's used on the home screen. Like if you add it, install it on your Android device, the description. So they don't have a description in. That'd be an improvement, right? So, and then the start URL for the Starbucks app. So that's where I was saying earlier, it could be Starbucks app.starbucks.com could start a PWA actually somewhere else in the structure and apply those there. There's decisions why you would do that. So that's a great way to check that out. And this will also help if you don't have a manifest file. There's also some tools to do, and I've got some links to that later in the deck too to check out, but there's tools to help you create a manifest. Also adding icons and all the things that go in there. But you see some of the things that go into the manifest, like theme color, background color, all the different icons. So that's a piece of it, so that browsers frankly know what are you doing here, and apps know how, mobile devices know how to install those pieces. think that's awesome. And then, so there are some tools here on service workers. So service workers, what's really cool about them, it's just JavaScript. So here, let's see here, we've got, make your site work. So, all right. So they kind of explain some of these pieces. This is not completely exhaustive, but they do get into some of the features like advanced caching and like offline copies, offline copy of pages or offline page and what that looks like. You can expect using this, the actual service worker that's used. I've actually got, service workers can get pretty complex, and you can even have lists of pages in them that you want to be pre-cached and things like that, to be offline and available, and assets can be listed. So they can get pretty complex. I've got a link to some tools that'll help with that. There's a Google tool that actually helps you with service workers. But Lighthouse will still help. So Lighthouse is still a great tool when you get into the building of that. And yeah, there's really nothing left on security, but definitely check out PWABuilder.com. The only other thing actually that's intriguing, I think it's the reason I found PWABuilder.com, is if you get to, so there's a button here that says Build My PWA. This is interesting. So it will let you down, if you've made some changes to any of those fields, it'll let you download those. But I found this kind of interesting and kind of strange at the same time. But it will allow you, for instance, to download an Android project that you can use an Android project, Studio project, and download an Xcode project that takes the PWA and kind of puts it inside an Xcode project so you could publish it to the app stores. I know, I see sort of the benefit here. And of course with Windows, you just, they can publish it directly. But it seems interesting to me. I'm not convinced, for me at least, I think there's options for that. There's an article I found this on, that's how I found this site, where somebody had done that. It was on a Medium article, but they had actually published it on the app stores of their progressive web app. For me, I probably am looking at other solutions. Like, I'm really big right now into Flutter. I think that's really a future for native apps. But if I'm doing progressive web apps, I'm keeping them probably in the web world, but I still think it's interesting. Obviously, people are publishing progressive web apps to app stores, and I would like to do that, but I don't want to do it through an Xcode project. I would rather have the button that says, "Here's my progressive web app. Now Google and Apple just take it and make it work." But I don't really have to worry about it, because with a PWA you can install it, and hopefully that's what I really want. I want Apple ultimately to make it better to install the app on the home screen. I don't want to go to the share sheet. That is rough. So Gatsby, who in here is using Gatsby right now? Messing around with Gatsby. Nobody's using Gatsby yet? All right. Well, Gatsby's awesome. There's a lot of Gatsby talk today at this camp and tomorrow, but if you're using Gatsby, I wanted to talk a little bit about some of the tools. To make Gatsby a progressive web application when you set up Gatsby. And Gatsby is a static site generating type tool. A lot of folks are now connecting it to Drupal and other backends. It can connect to WordPress and Drupal. It can connect to a Google Sheet and get data. It's really flexible. But it will, once you deploy it, it's very fast because of the way it's set up, static generated. But it's also React, so it means if you use React already, you can then have React make calls after the static part's loaded. It can still change data and refresh without refreshing the page. But first of all, you got to run HTTPS. They don't have a plugin for that. You're on your own. I recommend Let's Encrypt. Unless you have clients that have needs for other certificates validated other ways. Let's Encrypt's a great way to do it, especially for prototyping and things. I think these days, even our develop environments, we should be even local running HTTPS every time we possibly can. It doesn't make sense not to. And then, so from a Gatsby plugin standpoint, there is the Gatsby plugin manifest. And this will take care, so you won't, in Gatsby, you don't just make a manifest JSON file and drop it in the root. You might be able to, it probably won't compile. There's a way I think I know how to make it work, but this is the standard way they recommend to do it, so I would do that. So using that plugin lets you plug into JSON in some settings. These are all my assets and all the config for that, so that you can, it'll take care of making sure that it's available when it's deployed on sites, on hosting environments. And then the service worker, the Gatsby plugin offline, you enable that. There's some configuration you can do there, but that allows offline access for parts of the site, which is really great. There's really just fantastic needs to be able to have things cached and offline and available for people. And all of that got a link back to the Progressive Web App docs on Gatsby. So they were ahead of the curve there and already have it ready to go. It's kind of neat. There's another way that a lot of folks work on React apps. You don't have to do it this way, but Facebook's originally behind the React project and the Create React App project. The Create React App project actually allows you to it kind of makes it easier to spin up, here's my new React site, and I can go and start working on it. It has lots of features and capabilities. It's well documented. An example of documentation is, again, like Gatsby, they have a link for how to make a progressive web app with Create React App. But the real core for how they do it a little simpler than the plugin for Gatsby. They just have in the public folder that's hosted, there's your manifest JSON, and they've got a default set for it. You just go in and edit it. Can't get better than that. that's simple. Just go do that. And then as far as the service worker, they actually, it's commented out by default, but you simply uncomment it and it'll register, you switch it to registered. And you may have to uncomment something too, but you have to switch service worker register, and it will automatically provide that service worker code that you can add on to then. You still can write service worker caching and other things you need on it to in addition to what they've provided, which is just bare minimum. It kind of barely qualifies for what that's needed. So there's really good patterns for that. And I think it's important to point out, because these docs from both Gatsby and Create React App can easily get looked over. You could just move along, and I'm working on my React app, don't even go to this part of the documentation, and I kind of ignore it. And just with some pretty simple setup, a little bit of time, you have to measure the level of effort and what your goals are, but you can really get going with getting progressive web apps in both of these frameworks. I think it's awesome. Any questions on those? So I'm excited to say what's even easier. First of all, let me just say, when it comes, I love all the fancy new shiny. I really do. But Drupal is why we're here, DrupalCamp, right? So Drupal, it's not called React Camp or anything like that. Drupal is still really powerful for a lot of what we do. We can just turn modules on and have all kinds of tooling. We have user access and roles and all that built in. We don't have to go build that separately. And by the way, if you get into building React apps straight up, you have to recreate all the things Drupal does. I just want to comment on that. Go think about that tonight at the after party. Just think about what that means. Not saying it's not what you should do, but it's real. So earlier today there was a talk on the progressive web app module. Got a link to it. It's /project on d.o/project/PWA. This is the one, Doug, you asked about earlier. That is being heavily maintained now. Recent commits. Christoph is in the room and supporting that. I think Alex is here this weekend too. And that is, encourage you to check out the video when it comes out, because that is all about how to do this. All the stuff we're talking about is all the same principles, how to do it in Drupal. Yes, when web progresses, Drupal keeps up, and you can do the same thing in Drupal. You don't have to do other things to have progressive web applications. So really good talk, but check out the module. I will tell a story, and I've been saving this. I did not tell Christoph or Alex this ahead, but I had a great story. I did a previous version of this talk at our Shardug meetup last month, Charlotte Drupal user group. And while the talk was happening, one of our members and she manages, they have a small team and they've got a bunch of sites, international, translated. They've got some D8, still doing a lot of D7, like a lot of us, right? And while the talk was going on, she ignored me, which is fine, I'm just kidding. But she basically went to a dev instance of one of her applications, installed this module, got it working, and was like, boom, it's working. And I'm getting, I think 100% rating on, which is one of the talking points on the project page. So I think that again speaks to the module, speaks to Drupal and the capabilities. I think that's great. So thank you for that. Sessions tomorrow. Guess what? You can go to the session tomorrow. Don't wait for a video. I'm glad you said that because that's awesome. My days blur on Drupal camps. So tools and resources. I want to hit up a few of these real quick. Again, they'll be in the slides later, but these are the docs from, well, top link here is the progressive web apps from Google and all of their stuff. I added an additional link. This YouTube playlist is awesome. It's long, it's like YouTube, but hey, you've got time, right? Don't watch Netflix, watch YouTube.
Are you saying don't go to the party, but watch the videos instead?
Watch the videos instead of going to the party. Watch the videos at the party. They'll play while you're at the party. You can put in a earbud or whatever. But no, enjoy the party. I'm kidding. But this playlist is really great. It's Google people talking through progressive web apps, and so they go into depth on a lot of that. And then again, I love MDN. I love the Mozilla docs. I think they are some of the best web documents on documentation sets on the internet. Period. That's their site for that, for PWAs, and again, links to PWA Builder, which you looked at, what we can do today, what web can do today. And the Lighthouse tools, but I added a few bonus ones here. Let's Encrypt makes it really easy to encrypt your websites with set up HTTPS and get that going. Don't let that scare you away from doing the right thing. Check out Let's Encrypt for sure, because I think that's a great way to do it. The EFF backs it. I'm a big supporter of all that. So also Workbox, I have not used this, but it looked interesting to me. I wanted to put it on here because it provides some, it looks like some toolings that make it real easier. I should say real easy, that's terrible. Project managers would hate that term right now. It's just easy, don't worry. Ross, you don't want me saying that, right, Ross? But Workbox looked interesting. I think we should all look at that and see, would that help with service workers? Maybe not, maybe you like to just do it yourself, but it's maybe a good way to learn about what's possible. And you can find tons of these. You may want to generate this yourself, but Real Fave Icon Generator is one that's kind of popular out there on just Google results, and people, with blogs on progressive web apps saying, hey, here, this will generate a lot of those graphics and images. Personally, I kind of like my designers to kick out those because they've massaged the images where they're just right. I don't know what compression techniques they're doing and if it's what I want, but if you just need some images real quick for prototyping, might be a good tool to use. And with that, that's all I had. I'm open for questions. Thank you, everybody. Any questions? Yes?
All right, you mind going back to the slide where you showed the little Twitter.com?
I will surely do it. Here we go.
To me, the most mind-blowing thing was seeing our own website in full screen mode. You see that here in no browser Chrome? It's just all your screen is yours. If you're any way, close to design at the front end of your website, this is an amazing experience. Wow. My design is very screen. That's what you get when you install the app and you have the beta test configured to go into like a full screen or standalone.
Yeah, notice no, I don't see any, Chrome at the top from, just like you were saying, Christoph. I don't see anything here. It's just full screen. It's wonderful.
Swipe left or right on iOS, I don't know what it is on Android, to show back and forth in the browser. So you still get that. but you don't sacrifice being realistic. It is an app on your phone.
Yeah, I agree. And just looking at the numbers, you can imagine in no way is Twitter at all as a corporation thinking that their native apps are more important than this. They're right now with these numbers saying this is as important as our native apps from the standpoint of entry to our users. We would lose a significant chunk of users if we didn't have this as an option. I think that's important.
Once you install this, does subsequent visits to that page or to that link launch the app, or does that still have to be an extra user?
You mean like so if I go back? You're saying going through the browser to this?
Going to the browser or just following a link in anywhere else, would it launch the app, or would it go to the browser?
It would usually go to the browser. The app is the experience is once you install the application, if the person opened it, from their device, from the home screen of their device, that's where they would get back to this, to this kind of view and that kind of thing. But yeah, generally, if you go to a link, in other words, it's not going to. I think what you're asking is similar to and it opens the app, which do you like that? Like, is it? I'm asking the group too. Like sometimes I feel like that's cumbersome. Sometimes I want the website and I'm forced to go to the app, and that kind of is disturbing. Yeah. Exactly. And Instagram did that for me the other day. Like I was just literally trying to go to the web URL. I wanted the web URL so I could copy the URL from the browser and send it to someone. It opened in the app. It made me want to delete the app. I didn't delete it, but I'm considering it. It made me want to delete it.
Launching the PWA is still an explicit
Yeah, to launch it. But keep in mind, anytime you go, so this may not answer your question, but just to clarify too, you're still getting the PWA benefits, and maybe not launching it from the home screen, but even if you go to the site, it's still a progressive web app. And to that point, if you're on your desktop, Google just released more specifics. If you go to the Google Progressive Web App docs, the links are in here, there's actually a section now for desktop. So they've recently released advisement and how to make sure it's to do PWAs, not just on mobile devices like this, but actually from a desktop standpoint. So some of that was already there. I think some of it's them wanting to be clear that it's not just for your phones. This is for the web. This is for desktop. It's for any tablet. It's for any place you can pull up the website should be. So anyway, I hope that helps. But it's a good question. I like that. Any other questions?
So the services that platform makes available for native apps, is that becoming more rich in terms of what's available? An example is iOS. Big thing now is your app is worthless if there's no watch.
If there's no what?
Watch. Apple Watch.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So here's the thing. We're always going to be at the mercy of those platforms and what they provide through the browsers. It feels better on Android because Google's being more open about what they're allowing through the APIs. But for example, things are getting better. Last year, I think it was last year, maybe it was iOS 12. Yeah, maybe it was iOS 12. Apple released some updates that allowed some additional capabilities for progressive web apps. One of the big missing components for on the Apple side right now, for instance, that would stop me from using it for certain types of features is push notifications. I can't do a native like push notification on iOS, but you can on Android. So that's the thing. It's like if you're targeting more of that, you could do that there. Or maybe if if you're like, hey, I'll have push notifications on Android and Chrome, and it's better than not having it anywhere. So yeah, it is getting better, but we are kind of at the mercy for the platforms to open up accessibility to those pieces, those APIs, so they can be accessed. And that's where that website, What the Web Can Do Today, is helpful with, because you can go to that site on any of your devices and see it. But like I was really hoping for push on iOS, And if anybody in here knows how to do push on iOS and I'm wrong on that, I would love to know, because I'm frustrated. I'm like reading everything I can. There's a lot of people that are doing like other ways, like JavaScript notifications and things. You can do notifications other ways, but if you're really trying to have a progressive web app feel native, I feel like that's an experience. I want the notifications to look like the platform I'm on.
Are you saying don't go to the party and buy a Droid phone?
I think you should buy whatever phone you want after the party. Go to the party. I want Doug. Doug wants to go to the party. Christoph.
Yeah, but with all those caveats that we just discussed, our engagement with PWA started in January, and if you check back then at what web can do, on any of the platforms you check it now, there are a few boxes now that are available. It's quite amazing what you can do. So, and there's progress all the time. So I would, I agree, push notification on iOS or the absence of it is a big one, but things are moving. I'm very hopeful that we'll see a lot more in the future. And given that there is movement, I'm not giving up that.
That's 100%. And I think another aspect that that I read in an article that I think is really important, and that is that Apple has, we're not aware of this maybe if we're not an app developer, but they're kicking a lot of apps out that are really like websites that they think shouldn't be in the App Store. They've let them in, and now they're kicking them out. So, and an example of that would be just like your blog, right? You wrapped your blog in, I don't know, what are these hybrid tools that we've used in the past? Can't think of any now, but PhoneGap, Cordova, all these tools they're not great, but you can wrap stuff. We've all done it, and then you can put it in the App Store. Apple's slowly kicking those out. I'm hoping, it's hope, it may be false hope, but I'm hoping what that means is Apple's going to come around. They should do it before, but it's still great later. But I'm hoping they're going to come around and start adding more of these capabilities and say, listen, you're not here because you're not really an app, you're a website. But websites are still app-like these days, right? So it's kind of a blurry kind of thing. But that's fine, kick them out. But I'm hoping Apple will now continue to add more of those progressive web app capabilities to Safari and WebKit so that it can actually do more of those things. And we don't need to put it in the App Store. And wouldn't it be great to have a future where you don't have to have really an App Store? If they want to keep their App Stores, fine, but maybe they just need to ingest the PWAs. That would be ideal, I think, if that's where they're headed.
Are you building PWAs for your clients at Media?
We are not right now. Not full-blown PDAs, but I can tell you that I have... You got me. How many is that? 3, 4? Yeah, we're not right now, but I can tell you that since this research I've done in the talk and subsequently learning about the PWA module for Drupal and things like that, I'm definitely starting to push on that and say, what should be our baseline for this? There should be I feel like for us, there should be part of a service model where we say in our strategy level, not even before you get to develop. Shouldn't wait till you get to development, but in strategy up front, the strategy should be okay, well, let's talk progressive web application and where does that fit in? And we should have a standard way to say what features do we want to do, where do we want to go? Because then you can measure level of effort and decide what you want to do. But yeah, I think it'd be great.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
You mentioned you make your blog into a PWA, then I'm seeing this full screen. I'm wondering, okay, I hate share icons. I don't get the browser bar. How can someone share an article of mine? Do we have to rethink some of those things because now it's more of an app than it is a website?
Yeah, it depends. There's some models to do things like sharing already. So there's people who have solved some of this, maybe not to the degree you want, but there has been some, I've read some articles and there's snippets. I think even the PWABuilder.com site, there's some snippets that actually talk about here's how to do some of those things like geolocation and it may not be sharing, but as an example. And I want to get him too first for Christoph because he's.
You mentioned service border. What's the summary of what it does?
I'm not an expert on service workers. I feel like that Christoph's going to be able to get into that more tomorrow, but I will say that it handles a lot. Like when you saw the offline, online aspect, that's some of that functionality. It being able to have a connection that's persistent and to be able to provide some of those toolings. It's a little, it's not the manifest, but it's certainly a part that gives you capabilities to add features. And I think that's why I was saying Workbox is a great place to kind of go see some of those features and describe it. But Christoph, I don't want to have you preview too much of your talk, but I know you go into some things there.
Yeah, we'll go into that tomorrow, but and we can drill down it's all you want. You just drill up and down to the service worker. It is JavaScript code. It runs in a separate thread on the side. You don't get direct access to the DOM. It works with promises. So, okay, number one, you now have semi-multi-threaded JavaScript. Number two, it's a full network proxy. You get to decide what to do with each request, which is your cache control. So it's really, really full featured and high powered. It's a ton of control, but also a ton of ways to fail. And that's the thing. But yeah, we will cover a bit more tomorrow when I come to your talk. I want to say anything.
We will find out for sure.
Yeah. I wanted to comment on the sharing thing. My vision is that there's the web share standard now. My vision is that as soon as you're in an environment that supports it, that we can throw away all the sharing icons and have one icon to default, which we call the data share sheet. Yeah. And then you don't need browser Chrome for that. You have one icon somewhere in your design where it makes sense. And it rules them all.
Right. I just saw the copy the clipboard API. So, I mean, that's something that could work now.
And at 9 a.m. tomorrow, so that's when it's happening. So, and it looks like it's not. This is A, Peachtree B is, so it's just same side, but the other room there. So, thanks for coming, everybody, today. This is awesome.